On March 12, 2011, Rachel Ordley, the manager of the Lululemon store, came to work at 8 o'clock in the morning, as she did every day, to open the store. When she noticed the door was open, she assumed it was due to the carelessness of the person who had closed the store the night before. When Rachel entered the store, the lights were off and there were clothes and accessories all over the place. When she saw this image, she realized that the store had been robbed, so she called out and asked if anyone was there, whereupon she heard a groan that startled her and she rushed outside to call the police. Next to the Lululemon store was an Apple store that didn't open until 10 in the morning. But a man named Ryan Hawk was standing outside waiting. Rachel asked him if he could accompany her to Lululemon, to which Ryan agreed without knowing the context of the request. The day before, the second-generation iPad tablets had been unveiled. According to Ryan, he was waiting for the Apple store to open so he could buy one of these products. When they entered Lululemon, Rachel asked the man to go to the back of the store to see where the moaning she had heard earlier was coming from. Ryan went into the back room, saw a body lying face down in a pool of blood, and shouted to the manager to call the police as it appeared to be a human corpse. As the man left the back room, he noticed another woman there with her hands tied. She appeared to have lost consciousness, but it was obvious that she was still breathing. Ryan told Rachel that there was a lifeless body and another woman was still alive, and that it looked like both had been abused. At this point, the manager called the police a second time. The officers quickly arrived at the scene. It was around 8:20 when they saw the horrific scene. The store had obviously been robbed. One of the women lay dead in a pool of blood and was completely scarred. The other was still alive but unresponsive, bound with tape and wounded in the face. They were Lululemon employees Jayna Murray, the dead woman, and Brittany Norwood, the survivor of the attack. Both worked the evening shift and closed around 10 o'clock at night, meaning someone came in just before closing time and attacked the women. It was still unclear whether it was a robbery or an act of revenge, or whether Jayna was trying to protect the store and was killed as a result. While Brittany may have complied with the perpetrator's demands and survived. Brittany Norwood was taken on a stretcher to a suburban hospital to treat her wounds and determine if she needed to be hospitalized. At this point, it was not known how serious her injuries were. She had visible lacerations on her chest, legs, arms, and forehead, but most noticeable was a 5-centimeter-long cut on the victim's right thumb, which she may have sustained while trying to defend herself when she was attacked with a knife. The lifeless body of Jayna Murray was taken to the forensic morgue where an autopsy was performed. The outcome was unexpected as the attack was brutal, and she had more severe injuries than her colleague, suggesting that she may have actually tried to confront the robber. Or there was a possibility that Jayna was the reason the man had come onto the premises to kill her directly. The autopsy revealed that Jayna Murray's body had a total of 330 wounds, meaning that the attack was extremely violent, which usually means that it was motivated by rage. It begs the question of who could have been so angry or had so much anger to inflict so many blows. And it was not just murder, but torture. Jayna remained alive during most of the inflicted wounds, which means that the victim was conscious during most of the torture. From the number of wounds inflicted, it can be concluded that this could have been a very personal attack by someone who hated her. At the scene, forensic experts also found one of the most important pieces of evidence in the case, a bloody imprint from a size 46 Reebok sports shoe. They concluded that this print was made by the person who carried out the attacks. Both female victims of the attacks had a sporting background. Jayna Murray was born in Houston, Texas on November 22, 1980. She was 30 years old at the time of her murder. Her family included her parents, David and Phyllis, herself, and 2 other siblings. Everyone said she was a very positive woman. Jayna also traveled all over the world. In particular, she even traveled to China to study. While there, she took the opportunity to travel around Asia and also traveled to Japan. One of her hobbies was keeping healthy, exercising, and especially doing yoga. On her last birthday, when she turned 30, Jayna filmed herself bungee jumping. This also shows that she was an open and cheerful woman. And her enthusiasm for sport was evident from a young age. Jayna did all kinds of sport and dance. She learned ballet, jazz, tap dancing, volleyball, and much more. The details of her life also include her passion for Mexican food. What's more, her family now goes to her favorite Mexican restaurant every one of Jayna's birthdays to reminisce. And the truth is, everyone in her life only has good things to say about her. No one understood why Jayna was hurt, why she was killed. The investigators questioned everyone, even her boyfriend, the man she was going to marry. But no one had a motive. Apparently, Jayna had no enemies. But someone secretly hated her anyway. After graduating from college, the young woman moved to Arlington, Virginia to study at Johns Hopkins University. During this time, Jayna went to the Lululemon store in that city to find a job. But the store told her that they were not looking for salespeople, but that the Montgomery County store in Bethesda, Maryland was hiring. The Maryland store was a half-hour drive away, but she didn't want to pass up the opportunity because she loved the brand. Jayna sent in her resume and was hired a few days later. She got the job not only because of her yoga skills, but also because of her charisma. Jayna became one of Lululemon's best salespeople. In contrast to Jayna, Brittany, who was the second victim of the attack, had a somewhat more complicated life. Brittany Norwood was born into a poor family of 8 siblings and didn't have much to smile about. In her own words, she and her family were constantly plagued by racism. Nevertheless, her classmates noticed that she never lost her composure and was very cheerful. Sport also helped her, especially soccer. Brittany played the sport in high school and became one of the best players in her neighborhood. Soccer then earned her a scholarship to New York University. Her dream was to play soccer for the official U.S. women's national team and take part in the World Cup. Unfortunately, this dream came to nothing due to a lack of money and opportunities. Brittany studied sociology at the university in New York, where she had a scholarship, but then moved to Arlington, Virginia, where she had 2 jobs. In a hotel and in a Lululemon store. However, she was reportedly transferred to the Montgomery County store shortly before the attack. Both women lived in the city of Arlington at the time of the attack and led different lives, but had a similar passion for sports. They may have been the target of a perpetrator who pursued them with the intent to harm them. Sadly, one of them died, but at least one woman survived. Possibly to bring justice to her colleague. Initial details found at the scene include a man's bloody footprint and a knife used as the main weapon in the attack, although investigators note that several items from the store were used to inflict all of Jayna's wounds. In addition, 3 wads of cash were missing from the locker. It should also not be overlooked that the woman survived the attack. Brittany Norwood's story could explain how this happened and who is responsible for what happened. At the very least, the description could lead the police on a lead. The robbery indicated that this could have been the main motive. However, the number of injuries did not match the way robberies are usually carried out. In most cases, robbers do not intend to kill unless they feel compelled to do so when they might be discovered or the person is unwilling to surrender. Moreover, these murders are usually carried out quickly and with firearms. But the attack on Jayna was carried out with a knife, and the man took the time to torture her. On March 12th at 14:35, Brittany Norwood was questioned for the first time at a suburban hospital. She testified that the attack was not perpetrated by one person, but that 2 masked men entered the building. One of them took care of Jane and the other attacked her. According to her version, she was abused with a coat hanger. Brittany was unable to describe the events in more detail as she was under sedation. The officers agreed to question her again in the coming days if she remembered anything else. On the same day, the investigators questioned the staff of the neighboring Apple store, which was open until 11 o'clock in the evening. Knowing that the attacks must have taken place around this time, they asked if anyone had seen anything. Then the first witness, who had only heard voices, came forward. This person said that he had heard 2 female voices. One of them had shouted, "Talk to me, don't do this, tell me what's going on." And the other woman's voice said, "Oh my God, help me, please help me." Then all he heard was screaming and moaning, and when everything went quiet, the man realized he heard the sound of someone dragging something. Nevertheless, the witness, an Apple employee, surprisingly did not call the police. He simply reported the matter to a security guard who went to check on the Lululemon store. He looked out the window, determined that there was nothing out of the ordinary, and returned to the store. This employee also testified that he later reported this to the manager of the Apple store and that he left work around 11 o'clock at night, after which no more noise was heard. Investigators assigned to the case went to Brittany Norwood's apartment to see if she could remember anything else about the incident. When they entered the apartment, they were asked to speak with the woman, who was still in pain, in the living room. There she was asked if she could remember anything else from the past 2 days to identify the 2 men she had mentioned. Brittany then tried to explain how the events had happened. She said that when the 2 men entered the room, one of them walked right up to her and the other grabbed Jayna. Brittany described her attackers as white men wearing ski masks and determined from their voices that they were between the ages of 5 and 20 and 27. She determined that her attacker was about 1 meter 65 centimeters tall, and Jayna's attacker was slightly taller at about 1 meter 80 centimeters. Both were dressed in black and wore gloves. Brittany also said that after the murder of her coworker, her attacker tried to rob a store, and the other began abusing her. When she started talking about Jayna's murder and the abuse, she began to cry. It was clear that Brittany had been through something traumatic. But the investigators needed to gather as much information as possible since she was the only survivor and the only eyewitness at the scene. Brittany also noticed that the man said to her, "Your name is Brittany, and you live on so-and-so street," which scared her even more. But she also told investigators that she believes the perpetrators likely saw 2 bills in her wallet during the robbery for internet and gasoline that had her name and address on them, which she believes were stolen. Another detail Brittany mentioned is that while her attacker was harassing her, he began to insult her and even make racist remarks. And after the verbal abuse, the man pushed her onto Jayna's body, which was already lifeless at that point. The investigators asked Brittany if her family supported her. She answered in the affirmative and said that she had talked to her family about moving back to Seattle for safety reasons. However, she also mentioned that she had recently started a new job in Bethesda and was looking forward to starting work as soon as she had recovered from her injuries. Since the assailants knew Brittany's address, investigators gave her a direct contact in case one of them showed up at her home. However, when analyzing the evidence they received, investigators discovered something new, something that didn't make sense. Among this evidence was a medical report that caught their attention. It stated that Brittany Norwood had not been abused. It also described the injuries found on her body. Some on her arms and some on her legs, but most noticeable were a cut on her forehead, a scratch on her back, and a 5-centimeter cut on her right thumb. Compared to the wounds that had been inflicted on Jayna, what they had done to Brittany was almost nothing. But why should she lie about the violence? On the other hand, another witness came forward. Brittany's and Jayna's boss recalled the situation on the night of the attack. She said that she received a call from Brittany around 22, saying that she had left her wallet at the store and asked her to contact Jayna to come back and open the door for her. Jayna locked the store every night and she was the only one with a key. 4 days after the robbery, investigators began to suspect that Brittany might have been hiding something. So she became a person of interest in the investigation. Since Brittany had to provide hair samples and fingerprints, investigators told her that they would have to meet with her that same day to question her further. They never told her that she was of interest to the investigation, only that the samples were to rule out her presence at the crime scene, which is a routine procedure usually used when someone other than the suspect was at the scene. But the purpose was clearly to see if they could prove that Brittany had actually committed the robbery. And that was very important, because it was the only way they could uncover inconsistencies in her story, since they already knew she might be a suspect. The interrogation lasted 2 hours and 55 minutes. The first hour was spent taking samples, and the remaining hours were spent scrutinizing Brittany's testimony. She kept mentioning that the attackers were 2 white males. She was asked if she knew what kind of car Jayna was driving, but she said she didn't know. Brittany gave more details, talked about being afraid to face one of them, and cried as she talked about Jayna. The investigators released her and asked her to come back on March 18th at 10 in the morning. Officers were waiting for crucial evidence to make an arrest, and that evidence was surveillance footage from a parking lot near Lululemon, where Brittany was seen driving the victim's car alone. The interview on March 18th, Brittany's 4th interview, began normally. She stated that she was excited about the prospect of moving to Seattle to live with her brother Chris, and that her only concern about the move was that she wanted to continue helping with the investigation. The lead officer then asked Brittany again about Jayna's car. Again, she replied that she didn't know what kind of car her colleague drove. The detective then showed her a photo of Brittany parking Jayna's car in a parking lot near the crime scene on the night of the attack. Brittany then said that the attackers had forced her to move her car there, and that they kept following her. When she arrived at the parking lot, she saw a police car but did not call for help because she allegedly feared for her life. However, she could not be seen at all from the Lululemon store because she turned right after 2 blocks and was simply out of sight, contradicting her testimony that she was allegedly being followed. The detective then told Brittany that he didn't believe her story, that there were inconsistencies and that it was all made up. She was advised of her rights and arrested on suspicion of Jayna Murray's murder. At this point, several pieces of evidence had already been analyzed. DNA from Jayna's fingernails confirmed that the scratch on Brittany's back had been inflicted by Jayna during the attack, likely in defense. Although not much surveillance footage was found, what was available showed only Brittany, but not the 2 masked men. Furthermore, the woman was never abused. She withheld details in her testimony and changed many others to make it look like 2 people committed the assault. The prosecution also had witnesses against Brittany. Soccer teammates from a university in New York who said Brittany was nice, but she had a little problem. She was a kleptomaniac. She was constantly stealing and was expelled from the university because of it and lost her scholarship. It was also proven that the wound on her right thumb was inflicted on her when she attacked Jayna. It was also established that she had tied her own hands to simulate an attack. Several wounds on her body were self-inflicted, and she lied for days to both the authorities and her family, who had been convinced of her innocence for months. In addition, it was proven that the bloody male footprint found in the store was made by Brittany herself, using a training device that was later found in the store. The most difficult part of the trial was proving why Brittany brutally murdered Jane, what the motive was. 5 items that Brittany allegedly used to inflict the wounds on Jane's body were presented as evidence: a hammer, a dagger, a coat hanger, a stick that came from one of the coat hangers, and a Swiss Army knife. It was proven that the motive was not to steal money, as the money that was missing from the locker was hidden in the same room. The trial began in October. The evidence was so overwhelming that Brittany Norwood pleaded guilty to the crime of self-defense, claiming the attack occurred after Jayna said mean things to her and assaulted her first. The trial lasted 6 days, and the jury found her guilty of first-degree murder. On January 27, 2012, the judge handed down his verdict and sentenced her to life in prison without the possibility of parole. It is clear that she killed Jayna. The evidence is clear. And she partially admitted to killing her, although she claimed it was self-defense. But the question remains why. Although prosecutors labeled the attack as revenge for being caught stealing a pair of gym shorts, Brittany never explained the real reason for what happened between them that made the attack so aggressive. Many believe the real motive was jealousy. Brittany was jealous of Jayna's life, and that the murder may not have been over petty theft, but because Brittany wanted Jayna's life, which she could never have because of her poverty.